Please welcome to the stage Director Security Amazon, Jenny Brinkley.
I mean, a little more. That's like the saddest clap. Anyway. Hi. I can kind of see people. I'm wondering if I'm seeing familiar faces. I hope I am, but it's just a shadow. Okay, you don't want to hear my feelings. My name's Jenny Brinkley, as the voiceover said. Thanks for joining us for this session. Appreciate those joining in on the live stream as well. So today we're going to be talking about and defining security as our top priority and what does it mean at AWS. And I'm really excited about the panel that we've pulled together because you're going to get a very different perspective of different leaders engaging with different types of customers and different ways that we think about security as we define it as our top priority. So welcome to the stage, Mark Ryland, Eric Brandwine, and Cole McCarthy. If you'll come out and join me, guys. Mr. Brandwine, Colm, and Mark. Okay, let's dig into it. Have a seat.
Yep.
We're gonna make this fun, have some exciting questions to dig in with. But before we get started, maybe share a little bit about your role and how long you've been at Amazon. Do you wanna start?
Sure. Eric Brandwine. My title is Vice President and Distinguished Engineer. I am the senior-most security engineer in AWS Security. And our job, honestly, is to secure the world's largest AWS customer. Many of AWS's services are themselves built on AWS. So if you've ever had an RDS database, that RDS database is an EC2 instance. And as the largest customer of AWS, we're very interested in learning how to use AWS securely. Also, as the team that is responsible for launching these services, we make sure that they meet our security bar. We work with the service teams to make sure that the things that we're launching are what our customers expect them to be.
Awesome, thank you. Colm?
Hi, I'm Colm. I'm also a VP and Distinguished Engineer at Amazon Web Services. I work on a mixture of really low-level things, like virtualization and cryptography, and then higher-level services too. And every day is different. I've gotten to work on services from Amazon CloudFront was the first service I worked on, to now I work on services like our identity and access management services. And I work with teams, and we figure out what we're going to build for customers, and I get to talk to customers to figure out what to tell the teams. And that's almost all my job.
Mark?
Hi, everybody. Mark Ryland, the director of the Office of the CISO at AWS. I work for our CISO, CJ Moses, and I run a small team of experts who act as a kind of switching engine and making sure all the stakeholders who need to interact with our security organization, internally, externally, all have the right mechanisms for doing that and the right channels of communication. I've been with AWS for almost 11 years. I'm actually kind of a late bloomer in security. I started off in our public sector business, running the technical team, the solutions architecture team, kind of the field CTO. But after selling cloud to governments for 6 years, I became a security expert because the only thing they ever wanted to talk about was AWS security. And of course, working with fine gentlemen like these up here, I became very close to the security team. And so when our CISO asked me to move over and help the security team with its stakeholder engagement across customers, internal teams, policy people, and regulators, I was eager to take that challenge. So I've been doing that for 4 years now.
Awesome. So 11 years at AWS, what keeps you here?
Always, it's day one, and new technology, exciting new capabilities. Every time I think we've run out of cool things to invent, I hear about or help participate in some cool new invention, like, wow, that's amazing, we can actually do that. And it's just, I'm a technology geek ultimately, and I love working with customers. And the combination of customers and their challenges and all the great things they bring to us and the partnerships that we develop and our partners, and the constant new innovation and technology is just fun every day.
That's awesome. Colm, you've been here, what, 14 and a half?
Yeah, I joined in 2008. I came from a startup, and a big part of my job at that startup was building physical data centers, everything from labeling cables to racking servers and figuring out how the software would run. And it took months and months and months we had to have all these rigorous security controls because we were handling Hollywood movies. We were doing transcoding for Hollywood movies, and they had all sorts of rules we had to follow. And I just saw how painful it was and how long it took. And I remember being there and wishing, why can't I just launch an EC2 instance? EC2 had only launched maybe a year before. And so I figured, well, I'm going to go work where you can just launch an EC2 instance and figure out how that goes and be part of that.
Right on. Eric.
Hi, Jenny.
15 years?
It'll be 15 years in December. When I started, I was working on the VPC service team. So I helped define and build virtual private cloud, the virtual networking layer that interconnects our services. And that was a ton of fun. And then Steve Schmidt, who was the newly minted CISO. He'd been CISO for about 15 minutes at that point. He walked down the hall, he slapped me on the shoulder, and he says, "You're a security engineer now. I'm having them update the phone
Sounds
tool."
about right.
And I never actually joined the AWS security team.
It found you.
I was told that I was a part of the AWS security team. But that's been like 11 and a half, 12 years that I've been working in AWS security. And the thing that keeps me here is the never-ending stream of previously unsolved problems.
Mm-hmm.
The teams keep coming up with these, like on their face of it, they're absolutely crazy ideas. EC2 itself is possibly the worst product definition from a security perspective. It's allowing complete strangers into your data center to run arbitrary code.
Yeah.
Like from a security perspective, that's incredibly challenging, but from a business perspective, it's incredibly valuable. And so we figured it out. We figured out how to do it. And we've got ground station. So like we're talking to satellites in AWS services. Like there's all of these things that our services are coming up with that we can build to delight our customers, to serve our customers. And we've got to figure out how to do it securely. And I love that stream of challenges.
Same. It's been 6.5 years that I've been here. And time flies. Like when I really do break it down and kind of think about what we've done and collectively on the stage, the amount of time. So when we were really thinking about too, kind of building this panel, because we get asked a lot, talk to me about what does that mean security is your top priority? How does that really work within the business and how do you frame it? So from Mark's position and how he's engaging and working with our customers to really explain that, to Colm being embedded into a service team, to Eric being able to defend the position of where AWS security sits within how this ecosystem works and how we partner and work together. But also, he's really pushed to help be an innovator. And so a lot of people don't really think about that when they hear security and innovation in the same sentence. But that's how we really think about the functionality of how we work. So today is really,
Could I riff on something that Colm said? That's such a great example. You mentioned the security requirements of the Motion Picture Industry Association, which you wouldn't think of as a place where you're going to get top hard security requirements. It absolutely is. And in fact, in the early days when we first launched our cloud HSM service, I believe the requirement actually came from the motion picture industry.
Did it really?
For digital rights management of extremely valuable properties, which had to be carefully managed and encoded. And way back in the day before we had some of our broader customer base with very sensitive workloads, it was in that world that we first innovated to provide essentially HSM as a service. And of course, done a lot more since then, especially with KMS. But to me, it's a great example of how requirements coming from all these different industries actually redound to the benefit of every industry and provide that constant drumbeat of innovation. It's a great story and a great reality.
It really is. So speaking of that in terms of like innovation, education, reinforce and why we do it, I mean, I get asked a lot, like, why are you doing a dedicated service or a dedicated event focused on cloud security? So Colm, I want to hear from you. Like, why do you think we do this program? What do you see the value in it for customers?
I think it's a great learning opportunity. So as part of preparing for this conference, I'm giving a talk tomorrow, and I had to help others with their talks too, and was reviewing material. And just doing that, I learned about security features of services that I didn't even know we had. I was surprised to learn that Amazon Recognition has features aimed at, identifying privacy-sensitive information and PII and so on, which that had passed me by. We have so many services these days, and so many features that even as someone who works at AWS, and I like to think I pay pretty close attention to what's going on. There's just the volume can be hard to keep up with, and so I just found found it personally really useful to learn about things. And then I've found it a great opportunity to just meet and talk to customers. At least half my time here is being spent talking to customers who are all eager to tell me, which features they'd like and when and so on, and or other ideas and suggestions and things like that. And I find that invaluable. And I know the teams I work with find that invaluable because that's usually what we work directly from. So those are the biggest things for me.
Yeah, well, we definitely want a lot of feedback too about the program and how the evolution of the content's working. Because we're obviously trying to think through different ways of how we share the content, making things available for those on the live stream too. So I want to change topics and kind of get to the heart about what this talk is, how we define security as our top priority. Mark, go first. What does it mean to you? And how do you live it?
From where I sit, it means that our security organization should be very, very tightly connected to both all of our customers, all of our internal stakeholders, all the external stakeholders, and making sure those lines of communication are open. The right people are talking to the right people, and the right signals are coming in so that we know what are the most important things for our customers and that we can react to that accordingly. And as well as a lot of important outbound communication. We have customers that want to go very, very deep, not only on our features and capabilities, but like how do we secure our platform. And so I work a lot with our security leaders like Eric and others on the security leadership team to make sure that customers get the information they need about kind of lift the lid a little bit, what's going on inside the cloud. And we're able to, to meet some really tough requirements from customers who demand they have very high expectations, and we love being able to talk about how we can meet those. So top priority for me is making sure that people are getting the key information they need to make the decisions that are all about, advancing the industry and digital transformation, which is what we're all trying to do.
Do you have any recommendations for how people can track or find that?
Well, Colm's comment reminded me, I've actually started a blog series we just published a couple weeks ago. We're going to do a quarterly update of all the feature launches that a security professional might want to be aware of, because often they're not in very well-defined places. It might be an RDS feature, it might be a feature of some other service. So what we're doing now is, we just started this series. We're combing through every single little tiny product release and pointing out that, hey, you may not have noticed it, but this capability was added to S3, and as a security professional, you should be aware of that. A great example for S3 was we added this feature a while ago, which was called access points, which is a really great capability for providing much more fine-grained access control and delegating to work groups management of certain parts of a very large bucket, for example. But it didn't have an easy drop-in compatibility with the old code that everyone is running, which talks to S3 buckets. So when the access point team launched bucket aliases, which didn't look like a major feature release, it's actually extremely important, because now all the S3 code you have that can talk to buckets can talk to access points without changing a single bit of code. Just change the DNS name. And all the security benefits of access points suddenly become available to your central teams that are trying to manage your S3 estate. So those kinds of things are really important to track, and we're working hard to make sure that customers are aware of that constant change, because it is a challenge, but we want to take up that challenge and make sure we meet it.
Okay, I didn't even know you were doing a quarterly blog series. So I'm like, that is cool. We need to talk, because I think there's some other ways that we can do a much better job, I think, too, and so I'm sharing a lot more about the features, because I think we do anyway, I'm about to go off. I will not. I'm going to pivot on something. Eric, how about you? Security is our top priority.
So security being a top priority means that the security team is always heard. It doesn't mean we always win. In fact, talking about the security team winning implies that someone else is losing, and that's setting up the wrong relationship. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to have a partnership with the service teams. And so I know that I can call on anyone, anywhere in the company, and I can get a conversation with them, and that when I raise a concern, they're going to take it seriously. Yeah. The other thing that security being our top priority means, I watch a lot of cooking videos on YouTube, and towards the end,
You do?
I do actually.
Okay. I am shocked by that.
I have layers, Jenny.
You're a complex soul. You watch cooking videos on YouTube. Okay, continue.
I can vouch that Eric is a very good cook.
Thank you, Colm.
Really? Okay, all right. Oh.
So most of
To
these
be
videos,
discussed. Go.
towards the end, they say season to taste. And you sprinkle a little bit of salt or
Okay.
a little bit
Salt Bae.
of oregano or something. And that is the opposite of the way that you build in security.
Yes.
You don't say, like, look at this wonderful thing I've built, can you please secure it for me? You've got to think about that all the way at the beginning. And the security is our top priority. That really comes from an Andy Jassy quote. He said this for many years in a row on stage at reInvent, security is job zero, which I loved because he started counting at 0, which all good computer scientists do. And I'm on the security team. And not look how important we are, we're the security team, but it makes our job so much easier because Andy says this is important, and he says it on stage in Vegas, and then he comes back to Seattle and he says that again and again and again to our leaders in much more private settings. And so that means that everyone listens. They don't do what we say to do. It's not that we're telling them what to do, but they listen. We get a seat at the table, we get to have the conversation, and they're thinking about it through the whole product development lifecycle.
And we've watched that evolution too with Adam being our new CEO. I mean, he keeps that same mantra, keeps that same perspective. And I think a lot of it, and not to like shine on the AWS security organization, but I will for a minute, in terms of how you've been able to establish that partnership. But I think also too is setting expectations of shared wins. To your point when you were talking about earlier, like we're not always going to win everything, but it's actually a shared partnership, which I loved.
Absolutely. And when you have this platform, and security is a very powerful voice within AWS, you've got to use that platform wisely. And one of the things that I love doing, I complain for a living. Anyone that's ever worked with me can vouch for that. Like, I am dealing with high severity tickets, I'm dealing with launches that are in question, I'm dealing with problems. Any chance we have to compliment someone, to praise something, to call out good work, it's incredibly important. And when something breaks, some research paper drops and all of a sudden some common library that everyone uses has some major issue, like everyone knows about it. There's news stories, there's tickets, there's calls, and like people's attention focus on that. When something works flawlessly, it's silent.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay attention, if you're not looking for it, you don't see it, and you don't have a chance to say, like, look, this person, like, they saw the problem, they escalated appropriately, like, we had a procedure for that, it worked perfectly, like, it was fixed in 30 seconds. Like, did anyone notice? And so any opportunity you have to shine a light on the good stuff, you absolutely take it.
Here, like, and we need more of that as a community too. I think we over-index on that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's really easy to do, but we don't do enough of it internally. I'm like taking mental notes of all the things I want to work on this year. Okay, calm on the flip side with escalations. Maybe talk a little bit about, actually no, you still need to talk about your top priority.
Oh.
Tell us your top priority.
Well, for me,
security.
so at Amazon we have a principal engineering community, which is what it sounds like, a community of senior engineers who are there to help teams design, build, review, and get things done. And part of what the principal engineering community does is run design reviews. And something I heard at a principal design review at least 10 years or more ago was this really short, simple set of what our priorities really are and how we think about making trade-offs, whether we're designing something and building it or whether we're operating something and handling it day to day. And it was security, number 1, durability, number 2, availability, number 3, and 4 was latency. And it's been so crisp and so clear, and it's never changed that whole time. In fact, it's so useful a set of priorities. I wrote it up on my office wall, and I point to it every so often when we're doing design reviews now or team discussions now, because it's always helped guide our decisions. You know, as engineers, sometimes we can become overly focused on say performance, right? But you know, that simple set tells us, but we'll never trade away security to get performance, right? And there are ways you could do that. There are corners you could cut. There are shortcuts you could take that would make a system more performant. But we just never do that. We know it would ultimately backfire, and it's not something our customers want. And so that's one just really simple, practical, day-to-day way we use it. And the other thing it means for me is I know if there's even a hint or possibility of a security issue, that's generally our new priority number one. It's what we have to work on now, you know. And if that means a feature might have to wait, or something else that we're working on may have to wait, that's how we do it. And it also means when we're building something afresh, we know to have the security team engaged from day one, that's always going to be the best and most efficient way to go work at things. We're pretty good at that. We have systems of affinity engineers and subject matter experts that are attached to different areas and so on. And it's pretty smooth, and everybody has the context they need in their heads to be able to build the systems as securely as possible. And that, I don't think, happens by accident. You know, I think having a team of experts like that, like AWS Security, who can help us in that way with that particular expertise on, our specific services and our specific topics, means we can actually make security the priority it ought to be, and it isn't something that we treat as after the fact or have to then bolt on to some design we've already come up with.
And a real manifestation of that is the Security Guardian program that we heard about today in the keynote. That is a volunteer program. No one is impressed into service to be a security guardian. They're all service team members. And we actually broke the program. You know, we started it. It was kind of a grassroots effort. A couple of people in the security org said, we need to provide more material. We need to provide better training. We need to help these people help their services get over the security line. And it did the normal thing. Little incremental growth. And then there were a couple of launches where, like, the application security reviews just went beautifully smoothly because everyone was talking the same language. They were all working together. And there was this deluge of volunteers that we couldn't handle. Like, we actually had to scale the Security Guardians program to handle the number of people that wanted to join it. And that was a sign to us that the culture is working, that we've instilled this belief across the company.
You just used the word culture for the first time, I think I noticed, but effectively we've been talking about culture almost this whole time.
It's true.
Without using that word. And I think that's a really important thing to just really double down on. And I think a great example that I'd like to share about security as a top priority, when we have a CISO council, and we share with our CISO council some things about our response to Log4j, which I think we'll talk maybe more about in this session. But we talked about cool tech, and Eric can talk about hot patching and all the cool things we did. But the thing that was most surprising and I think exciting for that community was when we told this fact, we said, okay, there were all these business leaders. They had year-end goals. It was right at the end of the year. They were coming down to the wire to meet those year-end goals. And they're told, guess what? We're going to do a bunch of engineering work that you had not planned to do. And not a single person said, sorry, I can't do that. I have to meet my goals.
True. It was so cool to be on those calls and
it
just
was
hear everybody
incredible.
just dig in.
They know that the CEO fully supports doing the right thing. And so you can, it's painful, but you're going to slip that goal because this is the most important thing we need to do right now. Yeah. And that, I think our CISOs were like, wow, that we have to get to that point where our company would respond in the same way to those kinds of issues. And I mean, it's the kind of business we're in, so it makes sense that we have to be that way, but it is exciting when it does happen.
Well, and also it goes back to Eric's point too about some of the celebratory comments that people make, but even when you're in the thick of it and feeling so overwhelmed, the amount of support that everybody feels, we got to do a better job too of enabling customers on how we do that internally. So a nod for things to come on some of the things we really want to start working on, give some more perspective. We haven't said escalation yet. I mean, I kind of said it, but I'm kind of surprised no one's talked about that in terms of security as top priority as well. So maybe talk a little bit, and I feel like I should throw this to Eric first. So talk a little bit about the culture of escalation as it relates to security, how we prioritize it without overwhelming leaders, but just the philosophy and the culture of how escalation is used.
Sure. So if you corner someone on the AWS security team, and I honestly don't know who from the AWS security team is here this week at the conference, but seriously, if you corner anyone from the AWS security team and you ask them what is Eric's favorite word, they will all immediately say escalate. It's something that I preach all the time. And An escalation is not an admission that you're bad at your job. It's not an admission that you've failed. It's getting out of limbo. It's making sure that we make high quality, high velocity decisions. So hopefully you've all seen Groundhog Day, the movie. It's hilarious. If you haven't, you should see it. It's a great movie. It's a bad meeting. If you're in the Groundhog Day meeting, where it's the same people, it's the same conversation, it's the same lack of convergence, like, you've got to get out of that. And the way to get out of that is to get other people involved. It's to escalate. It's to make sure that the people that have the authority to make the decision that you're asking them to make are involved. Many of our escalations are informational. There's this thing happening, we think we've got a lid on it, but we'll let you know in a little bit. And that is also incredibly important. I'm not asking for help right now, it's just for your information, but there's a thing happening, and maybe they have resources that I didn't know about. Maybe there's something that they can do to help me. Or maybe it's just like, okay, I appreciate the fact that you're on it, and then when something happens, they already have context, they already know who's been engaged, and we have a much smoother conversation. And so we have a culture of continuous, appropriate escalation. And our leaders welcome it. It's just like Mark was saying. When we started our Log4j efforts, rather than paging a bunch of on-calls, and these are the people that don't have the authority to make roadmap-level decisions, we started paging at a bunch of the general managers and vice presidents. And every single one of them said, thanks for letting me know. What do you need from me? And those were escalations, and it worked out perfectly.
Colm, anything you want to add on that? I mean, you're kind of in it sometimes.
So I think as engineers and developers, we call ourselves builders, and we love to build. And actually, we have a phrase at Amazon where we like to be a place where builders can build and have as few barriers in the way as possible. But I think a lot of us start our career with this mindset of, okay, well, I write some code in an editor, and I build something, and I eventually ship it, and that thing's done, and then I move on to the next thing, and so on. But I found the longer and longer you run services, and that becomes your career, you develop a bit of a different mindset, where the job isn't so much, writing the code in the editor and shipping the thing, and then the next feature and the next service, and so on and so forth. You really start to appreciate, no, the job is keeping it running online, available, and secure. And those are what people appreciate. And to follow an analogy from a different sector, if you're, say, providing electricity, right? Your customers appreciate that electricity being available all the time. And our customers appreciate our systems being online and secure. And so it just becomes very natural that if you've got any challenge or any potential, anything that could interrupt that, you want to escalate, or you want to be escalated to if that's your job, because you know that just preventing any possible interruption really is what matters most to your customers. And it's just becomes our default mindset over time. And so you just stop seeing it as like not your job, and you start seeing it as that's almost the core part of your job. And it becomes the air you breathe and the water you drink, and that's just, I think, how a lot of us think now.
Could I riff on that? I think that's a really key point that you're making, which is an operations culture is naturally a security culture. Like if your job is to keep that thing running all the time under potentially adverse conditions, whether it's availability or network partitions or whatever may be happening, then you build a culture of responsiveness to high priority things. And that feeds directly into security culture, which is, hey, there's just one more thing that I have to be super careful, super responsible, and very, very responsive to. And so I think that's another reason why I think we've had a lot of success, and why anybody who gets into that sort of DevOps world is going to see improvements in security. It's because they're operators. They're not just shipping something and throwing it over the fence to someone else to then, hey, good luck with this thing. I just sent you this binary. Hope it goes well over there. I mean, that's the way our culture, our business worked for 40, 50 years. But as we move to a service culture, I'm running this service for you. Here's an endpoint. It does a bunch of cool work for you. It's constantly improving. It's running all the time. There's no planned downtime. We can upgrade it and add features without taking any downtime. And that's just a whole different way of building and operating and engineering. Then the security element of that becomes very natural. It's just a natural augmentation or component of an overall very operations-focused world, which I think is a great benefit.
And on the flip side of that, though, with the shared responsibility model, because now I would love for you to kind of talk about that, because it breaks down, I don't want to call them myths, but in terms of how people perceive shared responsibility and security as our top priority. Like, how does that work, especially with kind of what you just walked us through?
Well, shared responsibility means the cloud always will have features and capabilities and configurations that, if not properly used, can cause problems. And so when we show that boundary customers, I worked with a customer years ago who said, I hate that slide. Well, what's wrong? He goes, oh, I feel alone above the line.
100%,
like,
I get that all the time.
And I remember just my jaw kind of dropped, like, that is not what that means. What it means is we're going to do everything we can to help you be successful in the areas where you do make choices, where you do make configurations. And so I never presented that slide again for the rest of my career without having another slide which is kind of showing the upward arrows as you use higher level services, as you use our configuration management tools, as you use awesome third-party tools from our partners. We're going to work with you as much as we can to be very, very successful in your part of that shared responsibility. But will there always be choices you can make? Absolutely, because of the flexibility. I think, Eric, we were talking before, and maybe you want to go elaborate on this, but the flexibility the platform needs is always going to be part of cloud computing, I would say.
Now you have to.
Now I have
Yeah,
to.
I know.
So the breadth of our customers' use cases is stunning. And the way that you know that you've gotten the design of your service right is that you're talking to a customer and they say, oh yeah, and we built this on this service, and your jaw just drops. Like, it's something you never considered. It's a use case that wasn't even on the whiteboard when you were designing this thing, and the service was flexible enough to allow the customer to innovate like that. There's no way we're going to be able to predict all of those things, and so we want to get out of our customers' way when we design these services. And that means they need to be flexible. They need to have richness. They need to have appropriate complexity. As a trivial example, for one customer, making a bunch of data public to the internet may be the entire purpose of their service. And for another customer, making data public to the internet may be an absolute security disaster and something they have to completely prevent. And so we're always going to offer customers a lot of configurability and a lot of choice. And that's what's enabled this incredible breadth of customer stories that we have today.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. That's where the shared responsibility model comes in. There's a set of controls that we absolutely own. Physical security, the security of the hypervisor, and on and on and on. There's a long laundry list of controls. But there's things that we have to give to our customers so that they can accomplish whatever it is that their business objectives are. And one of the best ways to take advantage of the shared responsibility model as a customer is to use higher level services. If you can build it using a computer, you can almost certainly build it using EC2. But then you own an operating system, you own capacity management, you own a whole bunch of things. If you can run in Lambda, and Lambda is not as general as EC2, but Lambda is a higher level service. You give us some code, and we take care of making sure that the runtime, the underlying operating system are patched, that they're available, that they're performant, that they're scaled appropriately. Scaling up and scaling down on Lambda is so much faster than it is on EC2. If you can use one of those higher level services, the bar for the shared responsibility model changes. AWS assumes responsibility for more controls, and that frees people up. And this has been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned while working security at AWS, is that with scale, you can afford to fund teams of experts. The Lambda team wakes up in the morning and they think, how am I going to make Lambda better? How am I going to make it faster? How am I going to make sure it's still secure? And that's all they do all day, every day. So if I can move my compute to Lambda, they're going to work on my behalf. If I'm doing something inside of AWS, you're going to use KMS, you're going to terminate TLS on one of our load balancing services or on CloudFront. Like, we have these teams of experts all over the place, and we consume their expertise through services. And the higher level service you can use, the more of those controls you give to AWS, and that's exactly what we do when we're building internally.
So calm to you, I mean, as you're thinking about that too, and how Eric just teed that up, and you're structuring your team, and you're prioritizing the security hires that you need to make, or educating, I should say, in terms of your development population. How do you do it with the shared responsibility model tied to kind of what Eric just teed up?
So one thing I think about a lot is, since we own everything on our side of the shared responsibility model, and since, as Eric said, more and more customers are moving kind of higher up the stack, which means we take on more of the responsibility, of the overall footprint, it's been really fascinating to watch as we grow and scale. Just how many folks we have who are deeply engaged in open source projects or frameworks or systems that are out there. When I joined AWS, I'd been a long time open source contributor for the Apache Software Foundation for a long time. And it's been really amazing to watch that grow and kind of double down, and the amount of expertise folks are able to contribute and take a lot of pride in being able to kind of show up whenever there are security concerns or issues out there in the world, and they're able to give expert advice really quickly and find nuanced ways to go, okay, well, here's how we can here's how that issue might not be as serious as you think, or here's how we can handle this, or here's how we could patch something in a way that's going to be backwards compatible without customer impact and so on. And those folks, they're not getting up in the morning knowing they're going to be doing that. They're doing that in response to events, and time after time they're able to deliver, and it's just such a privilege to be able to kind of watch and be even just a small part of that, and to see that kind of approach succeed. And I kind of love that the shared responsibility model means that those folks get to deliver the benefit of their expertise so that a lot of other people don't really have to do anything, which I think is an amazing outcome.
It really is. And because I get asked in terms of, Mark, to your point at the very beginning, like, I'm alone. I'm like, you're not alone. Let's walk you through it.
Absolutely.
So I was going to say, do you want to have another point?
Well, one thing we should call out, we have this great field organization, Solutions Architects, ProServe. We have all these capabilities that we're constantly with customers to help them, again, be very successful on their side of this. And even if you use a lower level service like EC2, so I've decided I'm just going to do a lift and shift or something like that, there's still a whole lot of security controls that you don't have to worry about anymore that you used to have to worry about in an on-premise world. And in that scenario, you take your expertise, because it's a smaller surface area, you focus your folks on that smaller surface area, and you can still be very, very successful because there's a lot fewer things you need to worry about, as well as getting all this powerful centralization of like a central authentication system. CloudTrail, how many people on premises have like a central logging system for every configuration change made in their environment? It just doesn't exist. I mean, it's theoretically possible that you could set that up. Or single sign-on for your routers, where you have some magic thing where you can log into your routers, your hypervisors, and your operating systems all with the same username. I mean, authentication or MFA. It's possible, technically. It almost never happens. Move to the cloud, you get all that stuff kind of for free just by doing even a lift and shift. So therefore now, you still have a lot of responsibilities, but you have the same number of people, the same number of resources can now concentrate on that smaller area, get support from our field organization, and we see a ton of success, even when not using the higher level services. And of course we say, use the higher level services, because that's even better. We'll take care of more. So it's a win-win for the industry.
We get a lot of feedback in terms of how aspirational we sound around security. I know, Mark, when you're meeting with customers, you get a lot of feedback in terms of, wow, AWS security has all these great hires, all this great infrastructure, look at how easy you make everything. I can't hire fast enough, I can't train fast enough. So how does AWS security, well, one, keep up with all the demand and all the innovation, but also maybe some practical advice of how people should be thinking about building and structuring their teams?
Well, again, I think for the CISOs that we're working with and the CSOs, it's this new world of programmable infrastructure gives us an opportunity now to begin to automate things that were always previously manual processes. And so, yes, there's a shortage of talent in the industry. We're all struggling with that. But one of the hopeful things we have is that take that one security engineer, pair that person up with a good software developer, and suddenly magic happens, because what used to be a manual process that was expertise in someone's head now becomes something like, hey, we can write code to do that thing that I used to manually do 3 times a week or whatever? Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. And so we see, that is, the hopefulness of all this is, yes, there's a talent shortage, it's a struggle, but the automation is really going to be a great thing that customers can do on the cloud. And of course, we try to do the same internally as well. And we can talk about what the composition of our security team is, for example.
No kidding. Eric, to you, totally different question, but what do you want to see customers stop doing in security? Or maybe not as much?
So it's the same as ever it was. AWS talks a lot about undifferentiated heavy lifting, and that is exactly what I want customers to stop doing. And this gets back to the team of experts, the teams of experts that are focused on solving one problem and solving it really well. If you're building a non-trivial application, if you're doing something other than a hello world web page or something like that, you're going to be doing hard things. You're going to be solving new problems. You're going to be making product decisions. You're going to face challenges. And those are things that your team needs to do. No one else is going to do them for you.
No.
That's what you need to do. That's what makes your service unique. That's what makes your widget the best widget on earth. And so that's what your team needs to do. All of the stuff underneath that is it's extra load. It's a tax. And you have to get it right. If you're going to do anything online, you have to get it right. You've got to get the availability right. You've got to get the performance right. You've got to get the durability right. You absolutely have to get the security right. But a lot of that is going to be common. Something like patching a hypervisor.
Yeah.
No AWS customer needs to patch a hypervisor unless they want to run bare metal and really, really want to do it themselves. It's something that we've just completely eliminated from the undifferentiated heavy lifting that our customers need to do. And so ideally, and this is an awesome opportunity for us to talk to our customers, we should be offering a suite of services that provides customers with exactly the right amount of flexibility such that they're unconstrained when they're innovating on behalf of their end users, but that takes on the majority or our entitlement of the undifferentiated heavy lifting so that the only thing they're doing is innovating on behalf of their customers. And that's an aspirational goal. We'll never get that exactly right, but it's what we're working towards.
Colm, how about you?
Well, my cheeky answer would always be I'd like to see customers use mutual auth and TLS-based authentication less, but that's a very niche topic for a very small audience. But it's probably the most overused technology I see come to me sometimes. But I think the practices that I see out there from customers these days tend to be pretty mature, and I'm not banging my head as much on things as I was, say, 5 or 10 years ago, where we'd be doing customer engagements and hearing from customers how they were still on single account infrastructure and not getting all of the benefits that they could. So these days, in terms of what they could be doing less of, I think it's maybe being willing to be slightly more experimental. There's times where, because there's so much security built in and so many defaults are safe to use, there are times and occasions where there's a lot of benefit to be gained from trying something new and trying some new control or enabling some new feature that gives you more enhanced logging and so on. And every time I've seen a customer be willing to be slightly more experimental on those fronts, within very, very reasonable bounds, it's been very positive, and we've always learned something from it.
So I want to change the topic to a hot topic. It's going to get spicy. We're going to talk about.
We're ready.
I mean, we talk about and say, customer data is customer data, full stop. And that's how we operate. So Mark, maybe talk a little bit about how we think about isolation and security in the cloud. Can you share a little bit?
Well, one thing that I find frustrating in the industry is we use the word privacy, I think, just much too broadly.
Hence why I said isolation.
Yeah, so to me, the correct use of the notion of data privacy is, okay, I've got data, it's mine, I own it, I want to give it to you as a custodian, and you also need to use it. For example, I give you my email address or my name, my credit card. You need to use those things in order to carry out your business, but you better be a good custodian, give me final control, give me the right to be forgotten, all those kinds of things. That's okay, that makes sense. That's data privacy. But we also tend to use that term to talk about isolation and things like privileged access. So you're saying, we will use the term to say, well, is there any way that for one of your operators to see my data? It's like, we don't want to see your data. We don't need to see your data. We do everything we can not to see your data in most of our services. Now, we do have services that are designed where the software, not the people, the software needs to look inside because you've asked us to. All those services are optional. You don't ever have to use a service like Macy or WAF or any other service who's designed to help you by looking inside. But that to me is like a different issue than data privacy. I understand there's this overlap and isolation, but to me, I'd rather that we talked in the industry about what are the data isolation properties of this environment, and then we can express privacy realities through like understanding the isolation and the usage of the data. And I think by separating those a little bit, understanding there's overlap, I think we can have more meaningful conversations because I don't think the notion of privacy and all the regulations around that, well, I think we can meet all those requirements, is a good way to think about this other kind of topic, which is essentially, how well isolated is my data from other customers, from operators, et cetera, et cetera.
Eric, what do you think?
So I like the two layers that Mark is drawing out. And at the bottom layer, we have things like the Nitro system. Peter DeSantis talked about this at reInvent a couple years ago. And this is the end of a multi-year evolution. We actually make our own silicon. We have a fabless semiconductor company.
So wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, the bookstore makes CPUs. It's a strange
Casual.
universe. But we've moved our entire control plane in the EC2 physical servers off onto this card that we own completely. And so we own the system from the moment it powers on. We interrogate all of the firmware to make sure it's correct, all of the configurations. And so we have really deep ownership of this server. And then once it comes up, it's an embedded appliance. There's a single API endpoint. There are no users configured. When people ask who can access, the answer is nobody. Literally nobody. The only way to get access to that server is to take it out of service, which completely rebuilds it. It cryptographically shreds all the keys. It turns it into a brand new blank server running a development image. And you can't launch a customer image on a customer instance on a development image. There's like 6 controls preventing you from doing that. And so it's awesome. And it's a difficult place to get to. It was, again, a journey of many years. But it's actually an easier system to run because we've made this box, and this is the single most numerous box in the entire company. We've made this box as simple as possible. And that's gotten rid of whole failure modes. And so in places like the Nitro system or KMS, we can, with incredible certainty, like formal proofs of the security of the system, say there are no human beings that have access to this. And then on top of that, we have these higher level services. So Mark mentioned Macy, our machine learning services. I mean, there's no point in having a machine learning service because you can't build a model if you can't see the training data. But all of those are explicitly modeled in our APIs. So it's not you click a button to turn on Macy and then magically Macy has access to your S3 buckets. You have to add Macy to a role, and that role has to have access to your S3 buckets. And we automate all of this for you in the APIs and in the console. We don't want to inflict all of this complexity on our customers, but that means it's all there. It's all auditable. It's all explainable. When you say who can get to this S3 bucket, it's, well, this user and Macy, because it's an explicit permission, and you can understand what's going on. And then the nice thing about that, the really elegant end state, is that if you look at the history of network security appliances, like why are network security appliances so popular for like the past 4 decades? It's because IP won. Everything talks IP. Used to be all sorts of different network stacks out there. It's all IP. The great complexity of the applications next down to IP, and then it goes back out to the great complexity of different operating systems and application stacks and all of that. And so if you're going to look for somewhere where you can get the most value, you look for that neck. And the AWS APIs provide the exact same thing. All of our services use the APIs. They're all authenticated using IAM. They all use IAM roles and IAM policies. And so if you can automatically analyze those roles and policies and the interrelations between them, you can reason about them. And that's exactly what our automated reasoning team has done. So then we can give customers tools, with IAM Access Analyzer being a good example, where they can ask questions about what are the possible paths to my data, and they get a list back, and it includes all of the AWS services that can access their data as well. And so then, to Mark's point, they can then reason about, how is my data being used? Like, this data was given to us by this customer, and I want to run Macy on it because I want to understand if there's PII in there, I want to understand if there's certain other sensitive types of information. That's appropriate. But I don't want to use that data to train a machine learning model. That's not appropriate use according to the owner of that data, my end user. And you can verify that indeed no machine learning service has access to that data.
It's very true. And it was in a lot of those conversations when those services were being built when I joined the company. Colm, I want to take you back to December. You see things lighting up.
The December to remember?
The December to remember of 2021 was a magical time. I think you know where I'm going.
I do. I remember Log4j, and
I don't know what you're talking about.
it was a great Christmas present, great early Christmas present.
Happy holidays, Colm.
For folks who don't remember, look at you. But when the Log4j incident happened, we became aware of that, I think, quite early in the day, that that issue first arose. And we, I think, had a very strong assessment of it very early on, that hey, this Log4j framework is the default logging framework in a lot of Java-based software and systems, and that even though nobody had exact repros or ways to abuse this issue, that it looked like the kind of thing that people would be able to figure out quite quickly how to abuse. The issue hinged on how Log4j handles these things called format specifiers, and it supported something called JNDI.
It was a clever feature that someone designed and intentionally implemented. It was not a security vulnerability
a
in
feature. And it looked like people might be able to sneak strings in there that could in turn do malicious things. And our assessment was that, well, we're going to have to update a lot of Java-based systems quite quickly without interruption, and we're going to have to help customers do the same. And without really too much escalation or too much discussion, it was just kind of understood. Like we all knew that, okay, well, that's going to be our next few days of activity. And we started on a plan. What's this going to look like? Started building updated secure versions that disabled this functionality and so on. And so that we could get rolling on that plan and get things building at our scale. We have the ability to move quickly, but you also have to be cautious, and you have to make sure you're not going to break anything in the process. And we spent a lot of diligence on that. And we had, I think, a same-day meeting within a few hours with our top leadership, explaining, here's our mitigation, which at that point was already in process. We had already mitigated. We prioritized systems and services that handle things like secrets and keys and so on, and already well underway through that process by the time we were having that conversation. And our conversations were all about, well, how are we going to be able to do this quickly and safely? What's this going to look like? How are we going to communicate and engage with customers? And then as the days followed, we got even more kind of creative, inventive. Because we have a dedicated team of Java and JVM experts on staff, they were able to figure out ways we would be able to hot patch this, which would be able to help even more people. And so that was another aspect of the response that we ended up lighting up in the next day or two. And it kind of, looking back on it, amazes me that we didn't break anything. It was
a lot of change in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
It really goes to just how much preparedness and testing is kind of baked in and built into the systems. And that's easy to say and think about, but when these events hit for real, you kind of it's going to be your first real test of how well those systems worked. And it was amazing to watch.
Well, the only thing I want to say is that came from Colm from a service team, like how he explained what happened and what went down. I think this is also when people are like, you're so aspirational and how you all work together, but so much of how you outlined it. I mean, Eric, when you hear that from his description, does it match to like what you would expect?
Well, hopefully. I mean, if we're doing our jobs right, yes.
Yeah.
So Cole mentioned the Java team that we have, and this is another
Which
example.
a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, Amazon has its own Jvm distribution, and again, this is one of those teams of experts. They wake up in the morning and they think about Java all day, every day. And it's been absolutely magnificent having them on staff, but then something like Log4j happens, and the immediate response is, let's patch. I mean, that's what you do. You've got a vulnerability, you patch. One of the engineers on this JVM team wrote their own patch for the issue. So rather than taking the one case that was publicly known and making sure it wasn't dangerous, they actually took the JNDI functionality out of Log4j entirely. And so as the day unfolded and then the next day, there were second, third, fourth, 12th variants of this issue, and our patch worked against all of them. And because we've got a very large code base, we're actually able to show that effectively, to within a rounding error, no one was actually using the JNDI functionality, so removing it was safe. So we already had a patch, and it wasn't the standard patch. It wasn't the patch that came from the upstream maintainers. It was our own patch. And that's the patch, by the way, that we released in our JDK release. But then one of the team members came to us, and I mean, this was raving lunacy when they first said it. They said, like, I think we can hot patch this. And my immediate visceral response was, that's adorable, like we're trying to run an incident here. And they came back a couple hours later with a viable hot patch.
That was crazy, by the way.
It was magnificent.
Crazy cool.
It was magnificent work. So we were able to get this hot patch, which is what enabled us to run that out across our entire fleet.
Yeah.
But then we also applied the hot patch to the Lambda Java runtimes. So all of our customers running Java on Lambda immediately got this. And so this is, again, the higher level services, the shared responsibility model, if you can give controls over to AWS. And again, the internal teams that were running on Lambda, we just said, hold on a second, we've got you. And they didn't have to do any work to patch this.
Yeah.
It was only the teams that weren't running on Lambda, that weren't running on a managed runtime, that had to do work. And then we open sourced the hot patch.
Which was so cool.
It was on GitHub within like the first 24 hours of this thing being public, and it was a thing that people could run anywhere. Like, if you've got something that's completely unrelated to AWS, you could have run this on it and gotten yourself some protection immediately.
Okay, time has flown. One more question. What would be your piece of advice or one thing you want people to know about security being our top priority at AWS? Like one element for customers to understand.
I start?
Yeah, I'm staring at you. Mark Ryland, what you got?
I think it's, work with your account teams. I would say work with the AWS people who are there to support you in every way, our support organization, my team, and we will help you on this critical journey. I mean, we want this industry to raise the bar. That reason this conference exists was because we saw that the average industry security event was kind of this scary event with everything, the world's on fire and you have to buy my product or else you're going to die kind of thing. And we're like, no, we're as a community, we can do this. We can face up to a world that's got some significant risks in it. And if we work together, we're going to make it a better world. And so I guess that's my number one learning is work with us, get your teams engaged with our teams, use the latest and coolest technology. That's a part of the answer. But it's also very much about the cultural change and making sure that this is a top priority for all of us across the enterprise, government, and all the industry.
Colm?
Well, as a builder, something I super appreciate in our business and would recommend to any other business that has to serve customers is we are cautious in the dates we promise to customers. And every time, in every conversation, we give the disclaimer, but that might move because we may have to respond to security or operational priorities. And I just super appreciate that as a builder because that means we can make the space and have some air to do that security work when needed.
Eric, I'll leave you with the final word.
The final word.
Bring it home.
So I have been regularly amazed with how far a lone developer with a laptop can get in a weekend using Lambda and Config and Event Bridge and the various other services that plumb AWS together. And we have some amazing tools in AWS security. We've got a large team. We've been at this for a long time, and we have built a lot of value. But that value has all been built incrementally. It has all been tiny little improvements over the course of years. And the most important thing is just to get started. And the more confident you become at this, then to Colm's point, the more likely you are to loosen the constraints on your builders so they can go out and they can experiment and they can discover new things and they can find new ways to delight your customers.
Awesome. This was really fun, actually.
Don't sound surprised.
I do sound a little surprised. I'm like, what are we going to do? No, but thanks everybody for being here and sticking with it. I also want to thank the panelists for joining us today.
Thank
and
you,
enjoy
Jenny.
your thanks. Enjoy your Reinforce.
Yeah, have a great conference.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.